Guys, I'm Megan Barker. Welcome to Jammin and Jammies. We are sitting down with some of our favorite songwriters and music creators, industry leaders, etc. We're going to learn how they got where they are and get some valuable insights into the music world. You can watch the interviews online or tune into the podcast. Just check out jamminandjammies.com for all the details. Today, we are sitting down with my friend Mike Meiers. He is an Emmy award-winning songwriter, guitar coach, producer, podcast host, and creator of songwritingforguitar.com. He's spreading positivity and knowledge to musicians and songwriters all over the world. So we're going to find out how he does it. There's a lot of ground to cover with you, Mike. How are you doing?
I am doing good. I'm glad you ended on positivity because I'm like, yeah, I'm a pretty positive person for the most part. I'm doing awesome. I'm doing what it's good to see you because I joke, it's like it's been a pandemic since I've seen you last. I forget what it's 2019?
Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Yeah, we were just talking. We talked a whole bunch before I even hit record, you guys. Mike is so much fun, as you can see. Mikey, is it Mikey?
Yeah, it's fine with me.
I
As
feel
long
like
as
I
it's
want to
not
call you
Michael.
Mikey.
Michael's too formal. I never liked Michael.
Mr.
My
Mike.
parents always said Michael when they were yelling at me, or Michael sounds like a dropout art student. I'm like, Mike, it's too pretentious. So Mikey, I'm fine with both.
Okay.
So whatever comes out.
I feel like I met you as a Mikey, so I'm gonna roll with it. Okay.
Roll with it. Go.
Okay, it's so good to see you. I already know that this is going to be so much fun. You guys, we have so much great information here. I can already feel it. Just start by telling everyone, if you don't mind, like where you're from and were you always into music?
Music definitely I was always into because I wasn't really that good. Nothing else really interests me. Or I tried some things that I just didn't, I think I went through a hockey phase really quickly. It was like a hot minute where I was like, hockey. And then maybe like a month later, I was like, ugh. It's just like, but I grew up in Pittsburgh. So that's where I lived pretty much for the majority of my life. Only recently have I moved to Nashville, kind of the Franklin area, which is like, and I've loved Nashville, so I knew that was coming. So, but to be here is wonderful.
Congratulations.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's good to be here. Nashville's such an awesome place, and we like where we live, and it's so chill. I still love Pittsburgh, but like since I do music, it kind of makes sense to kind of be near a music city. But I always did music. I don't think there was a point where music really like left.
Yeah.
I did piano when I was super young. I started taking lessons when I was like 6, and I did that all through like maybe 7, 8, 9 years of just like move on to the next book that's like here's classic book blue, then purple, then orange, then brown, and then like that's all I did was just piano. And then in high school, that's where you define the music you like, I think.
Yeah.
Like, because you listen to whatever your parents listen to and you listen to different things. But then in high school, you're kind of like, I'm an individual. I'm my own person.
It's not a phase.
And it ended up being, it was a lot of punk music that I got into. And so you can't be too punk with piano. Like I couldn't lug a piano and be like, and all my friends were in bands.
Yeah.
And everybody was for it. And they were bands with horrible names. But now that I look back, but at the time, it was just like, they were so cool.
Right.
And it just seemed like everybody, like, they were playing garages, but it was like, wow. And so my parents got me a guitar, I think my freshman year, but it was so tough. I threw it in the closet and sat there for like 3 years. And then my senior year of high school, I don't think I did any studying. I think that's the year too, when you're supposed to like take it seriously.
Right.
It's like the tail end. Can we swear or can I not swear?
Swear away.
I totally fucking blew that to smithereens. It was all guitar.
Yeah.
I was so in love with guitar that I was learning everything. That's why I was taking lessons. And I don't think you could tear me apart from the guitar because I was like, I need to be in a band. And then that produced a string of terrible bands. And then eventually there was a slightly moderate band that didn't do too bad. We did the touring. We did things within our scene that were opening for other bands. We did like the Vans Warped Tour, which was cool. And it was
that's awesome.
But it never really, it was there, but it never really, it was, what the best analogy is like when our van was climbing up the hill in Chattanooga when we were going to Nashville, it was stalling so bad because it was like, and I feel like we never got past that, but we were always on just like that hill.
Yeah.
That's what it felt like. And then it just kind of died off. People get married and, kind of do this thing. And I started to teach guitar because I was working at a car wash and somebody was like, hey, my teacher's looking for someone to, do you want to teach? And I was like, no. And I was like, I work at a car wash. Do I know anything about cars? No. Do I want to be surrounded by chemicals? No. Cool. And then I ended up just falling in love teaching guitar.
So at that point, I don't mean to interrupt you, but at that point, were you familiar with like all the theory and everything that goes into guitar? Like, were you equipped to teach all of that, or were you kind of just teaching kids chords and?
It was weird because I didn't know what to expect. Because
Mhm.
and I did go through this period where I was like hit the panic button and pulled out my theory books, dusted them off, and be like
Right.
modes, scales, and all of that. And it was interesting because I'm not sure what, the age ranges. The youngest student I think I first had was like 4. The oldest I had was 83.
Wow.
So it was like these weird, like there was no like kind of like, set age. There were so many different age range that I taught. Also abilities. There are some people that are brand new, some people that have been playing for a long time, people that have been playing on their own, or they had different reasons of why they wanted to learn. And
Yeah.
so for me, this stretched my ability of how can I make this approachable, understandable,
Hmm.
and can I start to develop my own way of describing the guitar?
Yeah.
And it was cool because it made me appreciate all the things I was doing, but also I started to appreciate different styles. Because I have to admit, I was like a punk rock snob for a while. And it was like, this is the best genre. I think everybody feels that way.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because, like, as I said in high school, we're filled with like hormones and just like these weird, like, there's something about that time where the music is imprinted in our brain. Like,
It's
this
true.
is music. Everybody that likes classic rock thinks that's the best era of music. People that love, and I used to be like, country, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly I was dissecting these songs for people because, like, I'd be like, hey, what do you want to learn? They tell me a song and then I'd have to like deconstruct it. Cool, it's these chords. So my ear got better at listening for things. But I found myself loving certain songs I never thought I would love. Like I had this
Wow.
newfound appreciation. Like I remember when I first heard Jason Isbell, somebody was like flying over water, and I was like, "Who's this by?" Jason. I was like, "I don't know who that is," and I like listened to it. I was like, my God, that is like a beautiful.
Wow.
I love him. And I remember just going home and just like saving everything on like, Spotify, but save, and like listening to it.
Yeah.
And, I like somebody wanted to learn drunk on a plane once. And I was like, who's this by? And they were like, Dirk Spanley. I was like, I don't know who that is. Save. I was like, this is good. But then my ear was like, man, the production on this is really good. My ear was like starting to, because I was starting
Yeah.
to dabble. I was a dabbler. But it was just like this whole new realm. And then fast forward where I wanted to get into songwriting. And I took lots of different classes, did a whole bunch of traveling, really invested to being like, okay, this is my college. I didn't follow through on college. I stayed for a year left. And so I was like, this is
Same.
going to be my college. This is going to be my thing. So I'll take classes. Because people don't mind plunking down, I don't know, $300,000 in debt for like a degree they can't do anything and they manage a Hollister. But it's like I'll spend a couple thousand
Yeah.
to do that. And the only reason I say Hollister is because I once applied for a job there way back in the day when I was like 18. And they were like, "I'm sorry, you need a college degree to be a manager." And I was like,
Okay.
"No." And I was like, "A degree in anything? Like it could be anything." And they were like, "Yeah, as long as you have a bachelor's degree in something." I thought that was bizarre. And so I never forget that. So it's,
Interesting.
I know it's an interesting tidbit, but
Wow.
then I took all these classes and then started writing lots of good songs, bad songs, and then eventually found my niche in what I enjoyed, which was like television. I really loved, for some reason, television and film. And I think it was because it was just like I had freedom to play around in different genres that I liked.
Yeah.
And it was more or less kind of creating things that could be used for something that's already created or could be used for something that has yet been cast, created, ever thought of,
Yeah.
maybe a couple years from now. I don't know. And now it's like it still feels like I'm still finding out what I want to do, but and then I then created a class to help others figure out what they want to do in terms of understanding their guitar and just taking that same route, whether it's writing for an artist, writing for themselves, or if they wanted to do film and television.
Yeah, well, I want to dive in and talk a lot about songwriting and songwriting
Yeah.
for guitar and sync and all of this stuff. But before we leave guitar, I have a question. I've had people ask before. Oh, I have my window open because it's so nice out in Nashville
So
today,
gorgeous
guys.
today. Isn't it amazing? Like
Gorgeous.
every day's been nice.
Oh my
I'm
God,
not
it's
used to this.
beautiful.
Like we're Nashville, like partly sunny is like Pittsburgh sunny, which I always think is funny when people are like, it's partly sunny. I'm like, I see one cloud. That is sunny, okay?
Nashville's got gorgeous weather. But I just wanted to ask, is it ever too late to learn an instrument?
No, of course not.
Really?
No, absolutely not. I think if you want to, then do it.
Yeah.
Why not? If you're
Why
here
not?
today, then why not jump in?
Well, you
Uh,
hear, and I'm sure there's some truth to it. Sure, it might be a little easier when you're a kid, but
you know what? Sometimes the clarity can be better when you're an adult. And the only reason I say that is because when you're a kid, you're open to everything. And so you think you need to do
yeah,
this, that, and a little bit of the other thing. When you're an adult, you suddenly go like, these are the things I want to focus on. And
yeah,
it's this. So when
yeah,
you have that clarity, I think there's some more flexibility where you can jump in. And for me, what if you came in and was like, I just want to focus my songwriting for this genre, da da da. I'm like, cool. We need to do this, this, and this. Let's do it.
yeah. Well,
That so no, it's never too late. And I've seen people, pick up the guitar at like, 83 that have never touched it. Then
wow.
suddenly just jump in and be like, well, yeah, I remember it was an early on. I had a client, his name was Joel, and he would tell me he was 83 and he would be like, Mike, I'm gonna learn it or I'm gonna die trying to learn it.
I
It's
love
just like I
that.
was like, shit. It's like,
Yeah.
all right, Joel. So it's like, no, I don't think it's ever too late to learn.
That's amazing. That's inspiring because,
Mhm.
especially with, you've got songwriting for guitar, and I'm sure you're familiar with Songtown. There's all these
Yeah.
great organizations around town that are full of people trying songwriting and at different stages of life. And I love
Yeah.
that because I think there's, especially in like commercial music, there's all these things and stigmas that people stick, especially on women, but that's another conversation, but like on age and your accomplishments and these weird things. And you can do anything anytime.
I mean, I didn't think I really found out what I wanted to do till like my mid 30s. Like 20s felt like I was just kind of like drifting around trying stuff. So it's like
You don't even look 30. That's good for you. You look great.
30, 36. And it's like I'm still figuring out, I think
Yeah.
especially in this realm that I do, like when it comes to licensing, I don't think age matters. Like Judy Stakey, who's a fantastic one of my favorite mentors, she was like, it doesn't matter age. A good song is what matters.
Amen.
Ooh, I was like, you're right. I was like, a
Yeah.
good song does matter. So I
Yeah.
think, the way that we kind of like bury that stigma or that misconception about age is just more people going after what they want to do and stop
Amen.
listening to what other people are telling them. Oh, this is what you are or should believe.
Yeah.
Who cares? Do it.
Yeah. Well, okay. Well, you're just now getting to Nashville. This is
Yeah,
very exciting.
yeah.
So are you trying to write for commercial country music? Or are you really solely focused on sync? Tell us a little about that.
Yeah, so it's interesting because each time I came to Nashville more and more, I noticed there were more film and TV people. I know the right where people say like, don't turn my Nashville Californian, but I was like, man, there are more juice bars here. I'm like, okay. I was like, there's more coffee. I was like, I don't
Look at
know.
all the hot yoga places.
I know there's some more vegan, vegetarian restaurants. I was like, okay, I know they're saying it, but it's feeling like it. So, primarily what I focus on is film and TV. And there's been so many of these boutique licensing companies popping up more and more,
Yeah.
which is so exciting for me. And, really, that's been my focus. Could it be that it pivots later on? Could be. I'm open. What I thought I was going to do, years ago, I thought I was going to still be in the same city, working at the same place, doing the same thing. But then things change. So I'm
Yeah.
always open to change. Right now, it's predominantly I've been doing a lot of underscore and production music, which is really fun.
Yeah.
Just building out, this week has been like 12 tracks of haunting instrumentals, which I
Oh,
love. It's just
yeah.
great. It's so much fun. But it could change. So right now it's film and TV. 5 years from now,
Who knows?
I'm open. So
Yeah.
I'm always open to anything.
But you do have some experience coming to Nashville so much. You do have some experience, about the music industry, the country music world. I mean,
Oh yeah.
tell us about how they differ because everyone says that sync world is a totally different world. And even from my perspective, I don't have a lot going on in the sync world because I feel like it's a whole other world I have to focus on of the kind of songwriting and connections and yeah,
It's a different, from a lyrical perspective, it's
sure,
drastically different.
sure.
I feel that's where I struggled because when I was doing country, I was so used to in the sync world keeping things so vague
Yeah,
and just not specific, still keeping authenticity, but knowing like, hey, don't here are words not to use. Here's reasons why, because I don't want to say nighttime because everything could fit perfectly, but like it's placed in the day.
right.
I'm just now saying the word nighttime. It doesn't make sense. So it's like I was very sensitive to certain words that are just like, nope, 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 nope,
That's why
nope.
you were successful.
And so that's why I was just like, whew. I was like, this is tough. But what was easier for me, you know, especially for the sync world, is once we had a song done, there was a plan. We're going into this music licensor,
Yeah.
here, here, here. What was tough sometimes in country was like we would write, and that was a song, and I'd be like, okay, what are we gonna do? That's a good question. I'd be like, oh my. And so it's sometimes it may be a while that a song doesn't move for a while. And I think I'm very antsy and I'm
Yeah.
very like caffeinated where I'm just like, what are we going to do with it? We got to figure out something to do with it. And some people are like, well, it might be good for so and so, but I don't know. And so I'm like, man, it's completely different. We're sync. It's just like they're short deadlines. Like you may get something, I may get something that says, "Hey, this is due on Friday."
Yeah.
Whew, feel the crunch. All right, let's do it and let's get it done. Let's get the vocals done. Let's mix it. There we go. Boom, it's out there.
I love that. Well, on the other side of that, have you had stuff that you did kind of create and sat on your library for a while and then it was perfect for an opportunity later on?
Oh yeah, like
Yeah.
tons of things in sync. And that's what's interesting. Sometimes things in sync are time relevant and sometimes they're not. Like
Mhm.
you could have like a song that you did. I've had songs placed that I've done maybe like 3 years ago
Oh,
that I
wow.
forget about. And then
Yeah.
suddenly you get an email that says, "Hey, can you confirm this is one stop?" Da 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 da. Da," and I'm like, "Yes, all good." And then it's all set. And then it's off and it's published. And I'm like, I forgot about that song. That's right. That's a
That's
song. It's the
awesome.
same thing with instrumentals. You can create a body. Like last year, I did maybe like 120 different ones
Oh my
that I
gosh.
forget what they are. Like if you ask me, I don't know. That's why they're just registered in
You're
my.
like, this is really cool. What is this? Who wrote this?
I know,
Oh,
and so
I
it's like
did.
I won't see until maybe I get like my statement back, and I'll be like, "Oh, I guess that was placed. I forgot about that song," because there's so much that you can create, and I notice that's what I like about it. I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
I realize with country, you really have to like you've got to think about a good hook when it comes to your title. You've got to think about the
Yeah.
all those things before you even get into the production. You need to really think about I
Yeah.
did more track stuff. So that was
Mhm.
more of the area that I was focused on. So it's fine and it was great. But the thing was, it was just sitting in my hard drive and I'd be like, man, it's just sitting there. It's just sitting there. It's
Yeah.
just sitting there with sync. It's out of my hard drive and it's boom, it's out there.
I
And then I'm
love
moving
that.
on to the next one. I'm moving on to the next one. I think because I have a very ADD mind, I can't stay too long on certain things where I got to move to the next one, move to the next one.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's hard for people that are really good at country when they go over to sync. It's night
It
and
moves
day.
too fast for them.
It's
They're just
sometimes too
like,
fast, and they're like, "We got to think about this lyric," and we're like, it's fine. You don't have to think about it. Don't worry about it. Don't overthink it. It's good. We're ready to go. Let's go." And they're
yeah.
like, "Well, because sometimes you got to write it in maybe less than an hour. Let's get it out
Yeah.
in an hour. Let's do this. Let me do the production. Let's send it off to get mixed, get the vocals, and let's go."
Wow.
Yeah, I
Well,
think I
how
like that fast pace. I guess.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
love that. Well, and you come from kind of I think I haven't spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, but I just kinda think of it as more fast paced in the South. You know what I'm saying?
It could be just. I think it's the amount of coffee that I drink, and
It's just you.
I think it was just something that when I would listen, when I got onto the songwriting kick, I would watch when I would watch TV, I would hear music and I'd be like, I could do that.
Yeah,
And that's what kind of first kind of gauge my interest to get back into it.
yeah,
And then it did spring off to where I did lots of like building out country because it was cool. I enjoyed it.
yeah,
And then I realized I was overloading my plate with so much
right.
that, and we were talking about this, like before we were recording, like eventually I realized you can't do it all, man.
You
You
can't.
can't,
Yeah,
because I realize I'm not doing everyone a service. Like I'm doing the co-writers a disservice if I show up kind of not super
yeah,
focused because I'm really burnt out. And, you know, you're going to have to pick one. And
yeah.
one is not greater than the other, but your energy, if you want to be consistent and good, you can't do it all.
Jack
And
of all
so
trades, master of none, they say.
yeah, and so it's
Right.
I do get into country pop when it pops up for like instrumentals and they're like, "Hey, can you do like a Kane Brown instrumental?" I'm
And
like,
you're like,
"Go
yeah.
back, here we go." And it's just boom, it's out there. And then sometimes I'll pull in a top line or two because they're like, "Hey, we need like country pop about home." And I'm like, "Cool. I know my person to like, talk to. Let's do this and let's do this in under like a day or two."
That's
Um
awesome.
but it's also too what you feel is moving faster. And what I noticed was I started to get a lot more placements the
Yeah.
more I focused on the placement area. And I was like, okay, even though I enjoy this, I was like, things are moving here. And then I got into the production. I started to get tapped to do just instrumentals, and I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is interesting. And
Right.
then I just started to do that more and more for like advertising agencies. And that's what led to like that little Emmy back there. It's just because it was part of something that was a commercial. I didn't know commercials got Emmys. I didn't think that was a thing.
It's
Apparently they
amazing.
do. I know.
Yeah, it's
It's just like, but
amazing.
it was just like that then started to validate like the path that I was kind of like setting on to do. Cause I was like,
Yeah.
okay, that was unintentional.
Yeah.
Now let's try it intentionally. Cause I was like, well, if I got one Emmy, I want
What
another one. I
what if
was like,
I actually tried?
it's like, what if I tried? Just like not accidentally fall into one, but like try it. Like, okay.
But what a
And so like
great, like, symbol that you were on the right path, though. Like, how do you stumble into an Emmy, Mikey? That's crazy.
right, it was because it was the thing. I then focused to
Mhm.
do more licensing, and then that landed me on a panel locally when I was in Pittsburgh with two other awesome guys. One owned a studio, Rob, um, called Contagious Music, which was awesome, and then I think he changed his name recently, and I may be saying it wrong, but it was Contagious at the time. And Ime, my friend, he was a director and he already had Emmys. And he was
Wow.
like, they were both super rad, and we just talked about different perspectives. I was thinking we both connected, and I worked with both of them on different projects. And he would send me every once in a while, hey, I'm working on this directing project. Can you do this? And it didn't land. And that's about the thing about Sync 2. Sometimes you may have something doesn't get placed. It's almost like when you pitch something
Yeah.
to like you may get a hold, doesn't guarantee that it's gonna, get the cut.
Yeah.
But it just doesn't happen. That happens a ton in sync. You may get like that final, like right now as we speak, like this week there's a final for a possible trailer. We might get it. We might not. But the fact that we have that, like we're in the running means eventually it'll get somewhere. So that gives me confidence that if it happened once, it could happen again. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And I'm
But
sure go ahead,
yeah.
sorry.
Oh, no, no, no. And it was just, then eventually he was like, hey, it's this thing for the Boys and Girls Club. Can you make this
Yeah.
instrumental that sounds a little bit like this? And so I listened to his reference. He gave me the film. I threw it on. I looked and I composed it to just work on the transitions, got paid, got used, and it was awesome. Year passes and he calls me up and he was like, hey, it got nominated for an Emmy. And I was like, oh, because like every like section of the country has different, like, I guess, chapters of the
Mhm.
Emmy. Like mid-Atlantic, there's like, and I was like, oh, I was like, really? And so for me, just saying, being able to say like Emmy nominated, I was really cool with that. And so I was like,
So
that in
cool.
alone is great. Because I was like, that
Right.
looks great on a resume.
It
And
does.
then we won. And it was weird to have like a virtual, because this was during so it was all streamed virtually. So it was just like
Oh my
sitting at
gosh.
home and just being like, okay. And now that it happened and we lost him, but like Bob Saget did an intro because apparently he was from Philly. And so he did the intro to the
Wow.
Mid-Atlantic Emmys. And I was just like, and he was talking about like his time there. And I was like, ah, I was like, it's Bob Saget.
Oh my
And then it
gosh.
won. And so I was like, huh. I was like, that's cool. So
Is that
that's
what
kind
is that what you said? You were sitting there and you went, "Huh," when you won?
of, at first I did because it was just like,
No way. Did you
no.
wear a tux to your living room?
No, and we kind of I think I probably wore something very similar to this, very very casual, but that's what happened. And
Yeah.
it was slightly surreal because it was like, huh.
Yeah.
And it was just like, well, how'd you get there? And it was like, oh, curiosity and just kind of like
Yeah.
trusting, I think I'm moving in the right direction. So it's like sometimes we got to just like, and I think if I was doing too many things, that probably wouldn't have happened. I probably would have gotten burned out pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I probably wouldn't be doing a lot of the things I would be doing
What a
because
great
I'd be trying to
sign
please.
from the universe. That's amazing.
I know. Oh, I like that phrase because I don't know if have you read Big Magic, Elizabeth Gilbert?
My friend, okay, we literally just had one of my really good friends, Hollyana, on last week,
Yeah.
and she just read it and she like was quoting it in the podcast. And I
We're
I've
talking about
add
the universe. It's a sign.
it is a
You got to read
sign.
that book.
I I bought it. I just haven't read it yet.
That shaped the way I viewed creativity
That's what she
because I
said.
used to think it was like, kind of like, you've got to like, oh, it's tough. And then it was like, oh, wait a minute. Creativity is actually something that if you're moving in the right direction, you don't have to fight it. It will naturally, my demeanor and rights changed dramatically where I was like, well, what's going to happen? We're going to sit down and we're going to get a great song that we can use. Okay, let's do
Yeah.
it. It
Yeah.
flowed a lot better and I was a lot less harsh on myself because I think we have a tendency to be like,
Yeah. Well,
digging. Yeah, but yeah, read the book
I
because
really want
I
to.
mentioned it. She mentioned it. It's a
Yeah.
book you gotta read.
She's,
Yes.
Elizabeth is talking to me and she's like, Megan, read this book. But it's interesting that you bring that up. I just think there's so, and I can't speak to the sync world obviously very much, but just in the music world in general, there's just a lot of pressure and a lot of stress. It's so competitive, or is it? I mean, I kind of believe there's enough room for everyone, but sure, to a degree, it's very competitive. But I'm just kind of rambling, but there's just so much pressure and so much stress that I think a lot of people eventually burn out.
It's not
Um,
healthy.
it's
It's
not
not
healthy.
it's not
That's
healthy and it's not sustainable.
right. That's
That's
what
the
I'm
one
trying to
thing
say.
I'm learning. And no, I think you're right. I think
And I think you
opportunity.
you smell like desperation too. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but people
No,
can
no, it's
smell it
just
on you.
it's I the reason I changed, like people were like, "Oh, you give guitar lessons." I was like, I changed it to coaching because I realized there was so much more. We weren't just getting into guitar. Like if I'm saying to someone like, "Hey, why is your practice habits aren't, how come you said you were going to do XYZ and that didn't happen this week? Can you walk me through your schedule?" And I'm just like,
Wow.
that's why it's not sustain you and like you're not happy, you're burned out, you're thinking you need. I think we are doing all these things because like you see, especially like when people are like, I do my 3 writes a day there in Nashville, right? Number two, right? Number three. And it's like it's great. Instagram,
Yes.
it's Instagram
Sure.
worthy. But what we don't see in the story is just the bloodshot eyes, the
Right.
tiredness, the fatigue, the sort of like unhealthy eating, also
Right.
to unhealthy not taking care of yourself, the lack of sleep,
Yep.
the disorganization. That's not, if somebody wants to do that, that's fine. I just got to a point where I was like, I don't think that's how I want to live
Yeah.
because music is, there's no, I think whether you're writing for country, whether you're writing for pop,
Mhm.
whether you're writing for sync, whether you're just writing for yourself, there's no mountaintop in music. There's just a slightly higher level.
Yeah.
You keep on climbing, but are you going to enjoy the climb or are you just going to be
Yeah.
burnt out? And I think the change happens when people start saying this isn't normal. They start realizing it's okay to take a break. Like if your schedule
Yeah.
looks to, I hate the phrase I'm busy.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What do you mean you're busy? That means you just like you're so busy you can't tell me exactly what. If you can't tell me in a couple sentences what you accomplished this week and what you did, you need to rethink your schedule because your schedule's not working for you. You're working for your schedule.
You're more
And
like a life coach. I love you. This is
because
amazing.
that's what I realize guitar coaching is. Like when because like if we don't clean that up,
Yeah.
you're never going to get good at guitar.
Well, plus then
It-
too, I mean, aren't people getting really guilty then if they didn't practice the last couple weeks? They just kind of feel guilty, and then there's just negativity toward it.
because then there's negativity and then it comes into, well, I guess I can't do this. I
Yeah.
guess I can't. I guess I can't do guitar. I guess, I was such an idiot for believing I could do this. And it's like,
Mm.
no, 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 you're not an idiot. You just didn't. And it's like, then I just reframe it. I was like, did you make time for this? No. Are you filling your days with things that aren't working towards, before we even pick up the guitar, I'm always like, hey, what do you want to do with this?
Yeah.
Your answer is like, well, I want to write for myself and I'm going to be playing rounds. Be like, okay, so we got to work on technique and, metronome stuff. And we got to make sure that, the way you're presenting your songs are dynamically correct and that
Hmm.
they conveys your recording. And cool. So anything that's outside of that is
Yeah.
a distraction.
Yeah.
So if then they go like, well, I was building out this track too. And I'm like, whoa, 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 you want to get into track building now? Well, no, I just told so and so. They were like, could you maybe do like this and then this? And I'm like, why are you doing that? Well, I wanted to help them out. And it's like, did that interfere with the things that you wanted to do? Yes.
Ugh.
We got to say no to that, or
Mm.
just not now. Sometimes we also bend to other people's schedules. And I get it. It's sometimes you meet someone and you really want to impress them and you want it like there's
Absolutely.
an opportunity,
Sure.
but are you going to be serving them to your, 100%?
Right.
Or is your percentage going to be like, oh, I can serve them like 50% because the other 50 is going to be here. Oh, wait a minute,
Right.
I got this thing. So actually that 50 is now like 40-ish.
Right.
And then I got to, and it's just like we're spreading ourselves so thin. So no wonder people end up getting burned out and just like, how just either jaded, bitter, cynical. You hear
Yeah.
somebody that comes back. I had so many friends that would come to Nashville, come back. oh, this town, it's a tough town. And I'd be like, well, what'd you do? And I was like, well, did you network with people? Did you plan out what you wanted to do? Well, no. I just, oh, it's not that you can't do it. You just didn't plan. And it's like, so when I wanted to move here, I was like, I'm not going to move here until I know what I want to do and I have a clear idea. And I also visit the place. I actually come to the place. I start to spend time with the people because if I can't gel with it, I don't want to have this fictional idea in my head of what the city life is like. And then I get here and it's the complete
It's
opposite.
different,
So
right?
I don't know. That's a large spiel. Like, I think there's a very unhealthy culture, but I think it's slowly changing because people, can't take it. If you're working 5 jobs and you're thinking that you can do 3 writes a day for the next 2 years, I don't, maybe it's reasonable to say you could do 2 writes a week. That's okay. And
Yeah,
you have to deal and be realistic a little bit with where you're sitting right now. It's not to say you can't go to step 37, but don't start at step 2 and then judge yourself off of
right.
you were at step 37. There's a whole lot of other steps in between. So
Absolutely.
give yourself a little bit of grace and I don't know, just be kinder to
Yeah.
yourself.
This week has been 5 years since I got here. And then when I first got here, and even before then, I had an apartment here and I was here every 3 weeks for a week. And I was
Yeah.
doing what you're talking about. I was burning myself out. I was living in Vegas, so I would go and work 5 or 6 nights a week and make all the money I needed to pay
Yeah.
bills there and then pay bills here and figure it out. And so I think a lot of people do that at the beginning, and then maybe hopefully everyone kind of falls into a rhythm and you realize, it's all about balance and strategy and working smarter, not harder, my mom always tells
Mhm.
me.
No,
And
it's true. It
it's so
absolutely is
smart.
true.
You've got such a great mind for strategy and all of this. This is just a really great conversation. So I hope people are, heeding your words because those are some dark times that we put
Well, I
ourselves
think,
through.
we eventually come around to it. Like, there's lots of
Yeah.
things that I realized only because I did it the other way.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
it's a really quick, funny story. But years ago, I was in a terrible band that was on MySpace. Go figure. That's an old phrase, MySpace. We got this message. We had broken up, but then we got this message from this person that said he was a manager of this band. And I was like, yeah, sure,
Right.
buddy, whatever. And so I ignored it. But then a couple days ago, there was another message, and he messaged everyone in the top 8 trying to get a hold of someone. And so one of my friends was like, I think this guy might be legit. And so I looked that he was messaging from that band's account that he had managed. And I
Oh,
was like,
wow.
okay. I was like, so I gave him my number and I chatted with him. And he said, hey, man, I just want, I was interested in the band. I saw you guys broke up, but what are you doing? I was like, well, I think, I'm starting another band. He was like, my best advice to you, man, start writing, co-writing with other people. That would be my best advice. And I was like, what is this guy? No.
Yeah. This
So
guy.
he managed this band in the UK called McFly. Now in the UK, they're huge. They're gigunda. Here in America, they never really made that jump. At the time, they were about to do a movie with Lindsay Lohan, and they were going to be the band
Wow.
playing, and that was going to be their break and kind of their segue into America. Never happened.
Oh,
But the guy, he was like he was like, I wrote a song called "The Year 3000" that the Jonas Brothers just covered, and he was like, that was for a band here in the UK called Busted. And I was like, and he was like, my best advice, co-write. And I was like, no. I was like, what do you know? I started a band. And then years later, I came to the realization, oh, co-writing, you say, interesting. And I pretended like this was a revelation that came to me. But, there are certain points where we just go against the grind for a little bit. But then
yeah.
eventually we come around to like, you know what?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
So maybe people don't get into healthy habits right away, but I think it takes a couple burnouts before we realize, like, you know what? This isn't a way to live.
I think we realized at a certain point too that it's supposed to be fun. Like the reason we got into music is because we love it. And it's kind of sweet if you think about it. I mean, a lot of people we just kill ourselves when we get here in the grind because we want it so badly. So it's endearing, it's sweet, but it's toxic. So just be strategic and don't do what we've done, guys. You can be
I
better.
think that it's sweet, but like it is very toxic, but we come around to it because we
Yeah.
just realize the process should be fun.
Yeah.
Like, and if it isn't fun, then we've got to hit a timeout because we're probably also conveying that in our body language, how we're
Yes.
acting, because we've been so not aware of this that other people are being like, man, Jimmy never looks happy.
Yeah.
I thought Jimmy enjoyed writing, and then suddenly you realize, oh, that's why I didn't get called back.
Right. Right.
Oh, because
Right.
I'm conveying all this heaviness.
Right.
And so once we start to fix that and then get into that space of enjoying, our body language is naturally going to start to have that. And that's
I
where we start
totally
to
agree.
attract the people that we want. And
Yeah.
that's where people are like, oh, it's so fun to write with Jimmy. Like, it's like
Yeah.
he's good at what he does, but like, I also enjoy it. It's like the high point of my week. That's what I
Yeah.
want writes to feel like. I never want it to feel like, oh shit, I gotta make an excuse for Mike. I'm just gonna text him and say, like, right now, I am not feeling well.
Right.
I want them to enjoy the process.
Right. That's the way
Yeah.
it should be. And this is supposed to be an interview, but I feel like this is just a conversation of friends. So I just
Oh,
wanted to say that, like, right before COVID, that was even me. So two
yeah.
years ago, I was writing once a day, and then I was playing at night, and I lived 30 minutes away. So I was constantly just driving and grinding and napping for 30 minutes. And I was so I caught myself one night, I was playing, and I played cover gigs like 5 or 6 nights a week, and I was like just playing through the songs. And I was like, I'm not even enjoying playing music right now. I'm so fried. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to play covers. I don't want to play originals. I was driving home in dead silence because I was just tired of music almost. Like, in a way, you know what I mean? But that was a slight blessing that came out of this last 2 years, was just being able to step back and be like, okay, I got to reevaluate how I approach things. And I'm very happy in a way because I feel more clear-headed about it. I feel grateful for music. I feel grateful that I get to talk to people like you and share
Amazing
creativity.
how sometimes we go through the motions and we don't realize
Yes,
it.
I was.
And it's
Yeah.
just like a lot of what we do is just kind of like habit. And until it's just like, but the more we become intentional with, I've
Right.
been trying to think about when I switch tasks to what's the transition. Here's a songwriter analogy. Think of like when you have a great chorus, but the lead into the great chorus isn't set
Yeah.
up. Like
Right.
you're just like, that's how you got there. But if there's like that like transition, the payoff of the chorus is so great. A
Yeah.
lot of our transitions don't exist in our day. It's we like stumble into them where there's no like conscious like
Wow.
I'm moving into the next thing. Brendan Bouchard talks about this. I've become a book junkie during like I already was, but like during the pandemic, I just like started to just sort of like read constantly. It's not uncommon that I've got like I don't know, like 4 or 5 books like out, and then I've got
Wow.
Audible books that I've got going because it's like I realized I was very sloppy in my transitions of the day. Like getting to do this is awesome. Like, but the transition, if I just jump into it and be like, I'm going to talk about things, but it's like, oh, great, I get to talk about things. And I'm going to talk to Megan about like songwriting, maybe the
Yeah.
process, maybe taking care of yourself. This will be great. And then when this is done, I'll be like, okay, I'm going to then probably reorganize my cables, which is great. That will be a great feel. Being intentional
Yeah.
about what we're doing. But when we make those like transitions, we enjoy it so much more. We just like stumble into
I
like
know.
everything, and we kind of like are still juggling when somebody carries the stress home from work and then says hi to so and so, and then suddenly they're carrying the conversation they had with so and so into the conversation they're
Oh,
having.
yeah.
They
Oh,
didn't cut
yeah.
it off.
My
They didn't.
laptop came unplugged. I'm so sorry.
Oh,
Keep talking.
okay.
No, go
But
ahead.
it's like we didn't get into you didn't stop and be like, okay, so that's the end. That was this
Yeah.
day. Now I'm transitioning into the next part. They're not meant to be like the flood of feelings of how I was here, into here, into here, into here. And I think that's where we get burned out and we're just
Yeah.
like become a little bit more numb.
Yeah.
And then the next day it's the same thing.
But full
That's why we don't sleep well.
Yes. And well, and full circle, this is how the whole conversation started, is just I think I think it's kind of been like propaganda in a way, like these lies
Mhm.
that have been perpetuated for a long time, that you're supposed to suffer for your art. And I don't think it has to be that way.
Elizabeth Gilbert talks about that. So when you read Big Magic, she talks about literally that concept of like
Really?
she goes, that concept is disgusting. And the fact that that's even the concept of art. Like,
Yeah.
have you ever heard of an architect suffering for his work?
No, they're living pretty good
No.
from what I've heard.
Good. Have you ever heard of, I don't know, a podiatrist suffering for his feet? Just over there, just like, no, but why suddenly?
Yeah.
Like artists, songwriters, producers, top line, why are we suddenly now at the brunt of us accepting like you should accept the lowest wage, you should accept the services you're offering, it should be free, we're giving you food and beer, it's
Right.
just all these things. Like I can't give my electric company like a beer voucher and be like, hey man, this is for this month, here you go, It's really the exposure of your company is great for our house.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's such
It's
bullshit.
crazy.
And it's like
It's
there's
crazy.
I think things are changing for the better.
I think
And
so
it's not
too.
it's a slow moving ship that needs to turn, but it's getting there. And I think it's
Yeah.
the more that creatives become aware of this and
Yeah.
start going like, that's not okay. Like I should be getting 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
That's, because studies now show if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, what happens? You don't live as long. Your body starts to like those that give themselves more rest do better.
Yeah.
Why
Go
aren't we doing
figure.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, go figure. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
Okay. Well, this is
yeah.
so therapeutic. I feel like I just looked at the clock. I can't believe I've kept you for almost an hour. So I'm going to rein it in and just ask you a couple more questions.
Sure. Go ahead.
We're going to have to do this again if you're okay with that. We have so much more
Yeah.
to talk about.
This fun.
How do people get started in sync? Let's say there's people watching right now and they are, I mean, I'd love to dive into like the details of your production setup at some point too, but maybe we'll save that
Yeah.
for next time. But how does somebody get started? How do you meet the right people and get songs in
Okay.
their
So
hands?
the first thing is, and this is what's great about the age that we live in, pull up Google, type in tunefind.com. And right there, that is a great resource that has tons of shows that show what music was used, what the scenes were. It also shows the music supervisor. So when you hear that moment, you're like, I could write that. Okay, look up that show. What were the songs that were played there? Can you create a playlist of those songs that you can start to listen to? Because I guarantee you can start to find similarities in those songs. You can
Yeah.
start to find things that are carrying over that are patterns. If you can even find the music supervisor too, that means that music supervisor found that those songs for that particular show, felt that was a great fit to that scene. You can then start to research that music supervisor. What's the company they work for? What songs do they have there? So it's like it's a whole lot of research. But even before you pick up a guitar, before you start writing the song, you can do tons of research. It's almost like if we knew we were going to write for Keith Urban, we need to study Keith Urban.
Yeah.
Like it's like we wouldn't jump in cold and be like, I listened to some Kelsey Ballerini on the way here. It's just like because like you got to tell his story. You got to tell things that are important. You got to avoid phrases and words that Keith wouldn't use. You got to be cognizant of like the keys that he's in, the things
Yeah.
that he's liking. It's the same thing in For Sync. You've got to look for those similarities. So before you go off and write, the problem is people write a song and then they start throwing a supervisor. This is great for sync. They just haven't taken time to study the supervisor, what they place,
Mm,
what the styles are, and then they think, well, I can't do sync. It's like you can. You just got to pause, hit the pause button, and backtrack. So if you want to write for this show, what were the songs used?
mhm.
What were they? Did you study them? What were some of the keys?
Yeah.
Like what were some of the patterns, melodies? What sections were used?
Yeah.
There is so much that you could just do right now without paying for a single chorus, but starting to just like research what is getting placed. And that to me was super helpful. I spend probably a good chunk of time building out playlists that I just listen to. Like right now I'm listening to Around the World in 80 Days like playlist, which is it was like Hans Zimmerman and Christian Lundberg. Because I've like this year 2022, I'm like, I want to get into trailers.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, okay, so that's a whole different world. So I need to just like, how do I start to do the things in sync? I started to listen. Cool. I'm going to start to listen.
Yeah.
And so I just have this playlist that I'm listening to constantly. I'm sitting here and I'm like playing through things, grabbing my guitar and being like, oh, that's interesting. Because every time you listen, your ear starts to be like, oh, what was that?
Yeah.
It's just when you think you know it, your
Right.
brain then drops a little factoid that's like, hey, here's another thing. And you're like, wow. So that would be my best advice to someone that's brand new to sync. You can just start creating a playlist of songs from a show you'd like to be on
Yeah.
and start seeing like, okay, what are some of the patterns? Because you definitely can find patterns.
It's brilliant advice. And I think honestly that applies in a way to like the commercial country music world too,
Yeah.
is people will just send songs to pitch and you have no idea what they're looking for right now. So no matter what kind of music or career you're pursuing, I would heed that
Research,
advice.
active listen. I think every class that I've taken, no matter what it was, whether it was for commercial music, country, it was always active listening, repeat, always popped up. So I was like,
Yeah.
these teachers do not know these, any of each other, but they're all coming to the same conclusion that active
Sure.
listening is really important.
Yeah.
Oh, saving that. I'm like, that's
Yeah.
important.
Work smarter, not harder, I would say.
Yeah,
Okay, and one more question, and then I'm gonna have you
sure.
just plug everything that you do. It's been a rough year. I've seen friends leave Nashville. It's just been a really rough time. And sometimes things creatively, like you were talking about, a career in a creative path takes a long time. You never
Yeah.
know when you're gonna win a surprise Emmy.
Mhm.
So, what would you say to somebody who was maybe thinking about throwing in the towel? I'm sure you've had these talks with your students before.
Um, this is interesting that you bring this up because tomorrow I have a group, a small little mastermind creative students that are like, cool, I'm going to have them for 3 months. And every week we're diving into a topic and we're going to be talking about the realness of your why. Because what you said, throwing in the towel, when you define the realness of why you're doing what you're doing, like, you know, a few months ago, I was the same friend that, I won the Emmy with tapped me on the shoulder and he was like, hey man, could you create some underscore for like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood? I'm starting to direct that and I need some underscore. And I was like, for me, I was like, I remember watching Mr. Rogers growing up, and he's to me the reason of why I started piano because I saw him play piano as a kid, and I'd be like, I need to do that.
Yeah.
And I think I can't get behind many things in life, but I can get through literally anything that is like Fred Rogers oriented. And I was like, this is why I do music, because I can get behind something like this, an opportunity like this.
Yeah.
And I thought back of why I started music. And that was like, oh, this is cool. Even if this doesn't land and they don't choose any of these instrumentals, this was really cool to work on.
Yeah.
That in itself was like enough for me to keep doing what I do. So when you feel like you want to give in, or you're just like, you're throwing in the towel, sometimes you have to sit down with yourself in quiet time, which is hard because a lot of our quiet time is the toughest time. So that means you got to ditch the phone because usually in the first 5 minutes of quiet time, it's like, okay, I got to look at my phone. What's happening? It's because our brain can't handle it. We're quiet. And
Mhm.
suddenly it's just like, why are you doing what you're doing? Okay, yeah, let's say you get a hit song. So what then? What's next? Do you enjoy the process of what you're doing? Do you like connecting with others and helping them share their story? If the answer is yes, then you got to stick it out
Yeah.
because you realize that you can help other people. Usually, when it's a superficial, I'm going to get XYZ, you're not gonna power through. That's not a good enough why. Like, it's a nice thing and it's a bonus of the why. But if that's the only thing, then
Yeah.
yeah, that's when you're going to encounter that more. But I find people that even when the shit gets really tough and it's like they're not making them, they have to make some sacrifices. They've got to make some changes. They're not going to please everyone, but they've got to stay focused. And some people are going to talk smack. Some people are going to, kind of leave the comments and that doesn't matter. They can brush it off because the realness of the why is so like they keep on coming back to that in those quiet moments to just recenter. I don't care what you call it, prayer, meditation, whatever works for you, to be like, okay, that's the centering of why I do what I do. If you keep that in line, then yeah, things will get tough, but you'll just be like, okay, let's
Yeah.
refocus. Let's go back into it because I find that a lot of people that end up succeeding always have a really good why. You never hear stories like, I dreamed of making $1 million. Well, it's because I grew up not having a lot and I wanted to make sure my parents had more. Okay, wait a minute. That's why. It's not
Yeah.
that it's a bonus that you get the $1 million, but you want to provide for other people. Well, yeah, and I want to provide for other people and other opportunities and maybe create a fund for other students that want, there's
Yeah.
always something deeper than the superficial.
Absolutely.
And I think if we sit with that, then I don't know. That's when, so if somebody's listening, they're like, they want to throw in the towel. I would be like, you've got to sit with the why for a little bit.
That's
And then
amazing.
you're kind of like, then you'll come to the reason why.
Wonderful advice. I've asked so many people that. I love to end with that question right now because
Yeah.
there's just a lot of heaviness in general in this industry and especially right now. But that was one of my favorite responses. That's just chef's kiss, as the kids are saying. Do you want to just tell everyone where to find everything you do?
Sure. So they can go to songwritingforguitar.com. I have some free resources you can dig into. I have a class called Riff to Radio, which is open a few times a year that enrollment's open. But I have one if you've been listening to licensing and you're like, oh, I'm kind of interested a little bit. I have a mini course that's called Made for TV, which I walk through a sing song, how we wrote it, how I did the production, how I got it placed. So you can kind of,
Wow.
that's always available year round. I have a podcast, Songwriting for Guitar podcast. And if you subscribe to American Songwriter magazine, I write articles, so you'll probably see there was a realness of the why. I'll have to send it to you because it that comes up a lot. And yeah, so those are all the avenues
We
you can.
didn't even get to talk about that. Dang it, I forgot. It was on my list on my notes
That's
at the
okay.
top.
That's I'll bring you on my podcast. We'll talk about other things. We'll talk about realness. We'll talk about like I don't know the grind and how it's like not healthy. We can just keep it going.
We can keep it going. Yeah, I mean, and he writes for American Songwriter now too, you guys. It's just crazy. So if you're not already following him, follow him. We're going to tag him in the post and all of that stuff. But thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun.
This was so much fun because it did. It felt like this was not. It was a chat. I think about
Yeah.
important things and things that we both agree on,
Yeah.
and so I always love that. So this was wonderful. Thanks for
This
having.
was so awesome. We'll do it again. Y'all go check him out and we'll catch up with you next time.
All right.